Hi, everybody. Welcome to the second. We don't know what this year's adventure is. A year of a bunch of healing adventures. How about that?
Yes.
And we were and we were going to talk about judgment today. Does that still feel like a good thing for us to discuss?
Yes. And one of us should take a little bit of notes because the other word that keeps coming up for me is expansion.
Ooh. I love it.
Yeah, I think that's going to be part of the healing adventure. But yeah, first we got to clear out the old crap before we can open the doors for the new crap, right?
I love it. It encompasses all the things.
Yes.
So this might just be the year of expansion. Anywho, so judgment. So much fun. We joked last week. Were we joking on the actual call, or were we joking with each other about how our high horses are unicorns?
Oh, that was on our call. That was not on the recording. I don't believe.
Well, it is now. Naomi and I have had some very interesting adventures with judgment. And sometimes it can be fun to be judgy, and sometimes our judgy pants chafe.
Oh, seriously.
So, do you want to share what came up for you this past week with judgment and
Yes.
any
And
expansion that came from
oh,
working
look
through
at
that?
you working that expansion in. Yes. And one of the big things that for me was an aha around judgment is I used to always think that judgment was bad. So a judgment was like, oh my God, I hate Leela's hair. She looks dumb in that, which I don't think that, which is why I use it as an example. It's ridiculous. And anybody watching or listening would know it's ridiculous. But that's a judgment. And I always thought it was like something negative you thought about yourself or someone else.
Mhm.
And somewhere along the way, some brilliant person pointed out that no, I could be like, oh my God, that red shirt looks so great on you.
Mhm.
It's still a judgment.
It is.
And it's like, what? No, that's just a compliment. It's like, it's still a judgment. I was like, oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah. It
So,
reminds me of Wayne Dyer saying that to not care what people think about you, period. Like not care about the compliments and not care, but um not be affected by them, not just the negative things that people say, but also the positive things that people say. Like be able to take a compliment, but don't let that compliment like rule you.
yeah, because it might be the truth and it might not be. And it's someone's opinion is all it is.
Mm-hmm.
And that was just so it for whatever reason that has struck me as so profound. What Leela and I had been talking about when we were talking judgment, though, wasn't the oh my gosh, that red shirt looks so great on you, or oh my gosh, I love Gabby Bernstein. It was things like it pisses me off when,
Yeah.
and you're so lazy because it's the negative side of our judgy pants. And so for me this past week, one of the things that I was recognizing, I had judgments all over the place, people. And so I had an event coming up. I was bringing my mentor to town, and someone who had said that they begged me to bring her to town. They were going to help me fill the room. That didn't happen. They backed out and just really didn't do anything. And so I sat in judgment on them, and it pissed me off. And then I'm sitting there judging myself because, well, I didn't get the room filled either. And now I have to have this conversation with my mentor. And I was afraid she was going to be judging me too. And so there was all of this energy wasted
Mm,
around judgment.
yeah.
And now, is the truth of it, the room didn't get filled? Yes. the good thing about that is it ends up that after 2 weeks straight training, my mentor has lost her voice and couldn't lead it anyway. So we're postponing the date. So it ends up being a win-win-win. But I spent so much time tied in knots over this judgment and wasted energy judging this person for not following through on what they said, all this crap.
Yeah. And judging yourself.
And judging myself. Yeah. It was, that was a lot of wasted energy too. And we can be really harsh in our heads, sometimes out loud, about other people, but also about ourselves. And that's exactly what I was doing. Leela, in her infinite wisdom, and if you've not done a session with her of any sort, I highly encourage it. She did an energy pull with me. And what was amazing is it allowed me to let go of the judgments of this person who had said they were going to help and begged to have my mentor come down and who didn't. And I recognized it just brought me to this place of peace with them where it's like, okay, they're pedaling, as my husband would say, they're pedaling as fast as they can. They're doing the best they can with the tools they have. And instead of being in this place of judgment, it became a non-thing. Now, does that mean that in the future, if this person says, oh, I'm going to do X, Y, or Z, I'm going to use my past experience as a measuring stick, if you will, to decide how much, what kind of a conversation I'm going to have, first of all, but also, how much trust there is there. And it gave me a place to really, here's where I get to meet people where they're at. But I had to get out of the judgment first to be able to do that. Because if I'm in judgment of where they're at, I can't accept them for who they are.
True.
And so that it's been a really interesting week around all of that for me.
I love it. I totally love it. You answered my question. I was going to ask you what created the shift for you.
A lot of it was that that energy pull around that. I still ended up spending a lot of time in my head with a lot of judgments about not filling the room and I should have done this different and, whatever those judgments were. There were a lot of them.
It's a judgment party.
It was a judgment party, and which is not the same as it's a dead man's party. You could ask for more. Probably just dated myself, but that's okay.
We won't tell anybody.
But being so concerned about what was going to come out of the conversation with my mentor about the room not being full, and what judgment was she going to have, and blah blah blah. So it lets me see where am I doing that, and the shift in that was bit by bit. Because I had this moment of, what, if we have to postpone this workshop because the room isn't what it needs to be a powerful workshop, because yes, I believe where 2 or 3 are gathered, it can be powerful. And with specific workshops, sometimes there are certain numbers where for it to really have the impact it needs to have, you need to have more people.
Yeah.
And just the flat out logistics of it, the room costs money. So that needs to be covered. So there's specific things to look at. But I went back and forth between, if we have to postpone, that's okay. And then, I'd tighten up and constrict. And if we're talking expansion, when I'm stuck in that judgment energy, it doesn't allow for possibility and it doesn't allow for expansion. And I'm here to give you hope, people. I've been doing this work for, oh my God, probably 13 years. And maybe only 12. And so I'm trying to be younger than I am, I think, in that respect. But I still get stuck in my own crap sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
And I have surrounded myself with people like Leela. I have surrounded myself with other practitioners, with people who are willing to hold my feet to the fire and walk with me through the process when I'm struggling with it, be a truth teller, hold up a mirror, all of those things. That's what we do as healers and coaches. It's not about me telling you what to do. It's about me helping you to see by holding up a mirror. It's helping me to ask the questions so that you can shift whatever it is you need to shift. And I'm lucky enough and fortunate enough to have created that community for myself.
Brilliant, brilliant, brilliant.
So thanks for being part of that for me.
Ditto doll.
You betcha, sister. So what about you? How's it been for being, have you been up on your unicorn of judgment?
Oh my gosh, my unicorn's my favorite thing to ride, let me tell you. Which is how it started. How we started tumbling down this judgment path was me receiving a child support payment from my favorite former lover who has not been consistent with said child support payments. And he wrote me a check. And instead of being like, oh my gosh, how does it get any better than this? I received a payment. I received it in the time he said he would bring it. No, my first thought was, I don't trust you. Why would you give me a check? What is wrong with you? How dare you? And then I was like, wow, judgy much? And you know, that shifted rather quickly, but I did spend a good hour stewing over how dare he hand me a check. Um, and you know, like you with the person who did not honor their word, like he has a history of not being a a person who can handle checks well. and and I also realized I'm not giving him an opportunity to change.
Right.
I have not been married to him for 8.5 years. Who knows what has transpired in his, I have not had a checking account with him in probably 10 or in like 15 or 20 years. So like, who knows what has transpired in his world? And here I am just holding him to this space of, you are the check bouncer and this is your box and you have to live in it.
Right.
So yeah, that was super interesting. Something in the judgment family that came to me this morning that we haven't actually talked about yet. When you talk about like positive judgments, well, you and I have talked about this like privately, but then something new came to the conversation this morning for me. We talked about New Year, New You, and
Yeah.
how Naomi was ranting about this New Year, New You bullshit that everybody does every year. And oh my gosh. And I was like, actually, normally I agree with you, but I think I'm quite new this year. I'm not the same person that I was even 3 weeks ago. Like I'm having rapid ascensions and transformations over here. And part of feeling new is releasing all of the solid points of view that I had around who I am as a mom, who I am as a wife or a partner or a lover, who I am as a friend, who I am in relationships. And I'm like, oh my goodness. When I let these things go, when I don't demand that being a good mom means that my daughter lives with me, when I don't demand that being a good partner means that I make dinner every night, then like, how much more freedom do I have? How much more joy and peace and how much less crazy do I have?
Right. And what does it free you up to then do and be and create?
Exactly. And Crystal Joy Crawford is an Access Certified Facilitator, and I absolutely love her. And she talked on her Crystal Crawford Show radio yesterday about how she had these fantasies about relationships. And fantasies are judgments too. They're like judgments that we created and projected on our reality. And so we see a trait in someone that matches that fantasy, and then instantly we're like, yes, this is the thing. It's like if you order a red Ferrari from the universe, and like the first red Ferrari that comes your way, you're like, yes, this is my Ferrari. But you haven't like looked under the hood, and you haven't taken it to a mechanic, and you haven't gotten it checked out. You haven't put it on diagnostics. You don't know what's going on with it. And 3 miles down the road, the engine falls out.
Mm-hmm.
Because you just saw a piece of what you requested, which is a red Ferrari. But I'm sure when you wanted a red Ferrari, you wanted a red Ferrari that was reliable and fun to drive. And one that breaks on you 3 miles in is so much not fun to drive because you're not driving at all. Um, and the same thing is true for me with relationships and friendships. Um, like I have this fantasy in my mind, this judgment about how friendships are supposed to be, about how romantic relationships are supposed to be. And there have been so many instances in both of those arenas where I've been like, you match my picture. I'm gonna keep you. And then like, no, you only match this upper left corner of my picture. The rest of the picture, not so much.
Yeah, what's wrong with you?
And then I get on my unicorn and ride away.
Right? Well, and I think that that's such and even with the conversation about your ex and the not, sort of identifying him, how you relate to him is he is not good with checks. That's the definition you have of him. Yep. And as my half side likes to say, people are going to be who they are until they show you something different. Mm-hmm. And we can identify with them as that. We can identify with him as being someone who's not good at managing checks without being in judgment of it. Mm. I can identify this individual who is going to help fill the room as someone who gets caught up in busy and doesn't always follow through without being in judgment. Mm-hmm. But first we have to define these things. What does it mean to be a wife? What does it mean to be a collaborator? What does it mean to be? Because if we start to dig into what are those definitions, that's where we can then often see where do those judgments come from. The judgment is if you're a co-collaborator with me and you bail, well, I'm going to have judgment because I have an expectation of what co-collaborator looks like in my world.
More expectations. Oh no.
I know, right? They will bite you in the ass every time.
That is potent. So definitely digging into the definitions and expectations, as well as for me, once I get clear about those definitions and expectations, then actively working to release the judgments.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And recognizing, this person is someone who gets caught up in busy. This person might be someone who's good with checks now, as long as I deposit them the day they arrive. Right. Or maybe I need to stick with, please give me a money order or cash, because I'm also not good with checks. And what I mean by that is, if you give me a check, it might take me 2 months to cash it, especially if it's money that I don't require. If it's money that is just going to go into my 10% fund or into my freedom fund or into my wealth fund, if it's not paying my bills, then I think, oh, I don't really need to rush off to the bank. Mm-hmm. And while I don't need to rush off to the bank, this person might not have written that check in their ledger, and now I got a rubber check and it's more my fault than it is theirs because it took me 3 months to cash.
Right.
So, and I did communicate that. I said, hey, it's been 2 weeks. I still have your check, but here's the deal. I hate my bank. I don't like walking into it. Can you please give me a money order or cash in the future?
There you go. And it's such a great thing because asking for what we want, we've talked about that. That was, last year's journey, right?
Yes.
And the person has the right to come back and say, yeah, that doesn't work for me. Because frankly, a money order would be a pain in my ass because then I have to go to the bank, right?
Right.
And but it opens up the opportunity for dialogue. I want to make this easy for you as well, and I want it to be easy for me. What else can we come up with? There's so much electronic ways of transferring money these days that there's all sorts of ways that it could be done. And so it's great to be able to open up that dialogue and recognize too, this is where I'm not great with checks. So let's not set us both up for failure. Let's set us both up for success.
Absolutely.
Easy peasy. Yeah. So you mentioned some ways to process or let go of the judgment stuff. Very familiar with, Byron Katie's work. Those of you who are not familiar with her, she is a her, even though her name is Byron. Don't let that confuse you. And that's, I love that. And whenever you ask me questions like, well, that's an interesting point of view, it always reminds me of Byron Katie and the whole, is that true? And going through that process. So that's her process called the work is a great process. The energy pull that you took me through, I would say it was a byproduct of that because that wasn't what our focus was, but man, did it wipe that out. What are some other things that you would recommend to people for letting go of the judgments?
Google access consciousness and follow processes.
Yeah.
Also work with Naomi and myself because we are also good with walking you individually through releasing your own judgment processes, but definitely the work of Byron Katie. I feel like the work of Byron Katie and the questions that come from the access consciousness toolkit. And I am a bars practitioner, but I am not a certified facilitator of access. I'm just a really good student. And oh gosh, definitely, I don't know, my brain just decided it was done making words.
Well, I'm going to add one. And this one is maybe a little bit more of a logical approach, but that whole, what Leela was talking about with defining things. What is my role as mother, as wife, as lover, as, whatever it is? What is my definition of what it means to be a good collaborator? What does it mean to be a good leader? What does it mean to be a great X, Y, or Z? What do I expect from someone I'm in relationship at work? What does it mean to be a good business, coworker? What's it mean to some of these? It's like, well, doesn't everybody have the same definition of what it means to be a good coworker? Actually, no.
No.
They don't.
No.
Shockingly enough. And so sometimes when we're having judgments around stuff, if we can start to, just from a logical standpoint, like Leela said, start to define that and really understand, what are my expectations, especially what are my hidden expectations? Because when those expectations aren't being met, that's typically when we start putting on our judgy pants.
Oh my goodness. The hidden expectations is humongous.
Oh God, and it's part of who we are as people. It doesn't mean don't work to move through them, but it's like we're constantly creating them, or we don't even, it's in our unconscious and we don't know they're there. My expectation is, Leela is always full of giggles, and so on the days when she's not, it's like, what in the world is wrong with you, woman? I'm just kidding. That's not really how I react to her, but that could be a thing. My expectation is that Leela always shows up as a positive force in my life.
That's how the internet reacts to me when I'm not giggly. They're like, "Oh, are you broken? What can we
Right?
do? How do we help?" And I'm like, "No, I'm just having a shit day. It's fine.
It's because I'm two-legged like all the rest of y'all.
There'll be giggles tomorrow."
Yeah. So understanding our expectations, which is, I don't know if any of you are foodies and you watch the food channels at all, and you've seen things like the deconstructed hot dog,
Oh, God.
is ridiculous in my opinion. And that's a judgment. And just to illustrate, but sometimes we have to take those judgments and deconstruct them so we can understand what are the expectations that are driving it. And then we get to look at, okay, those expectations, are they realistic? Have they been communicated to the other person? Because it's really hard to frickin' live up to expectations that nobody told you were there.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah.
so we get to, it gives us a place to play. And so for me, sometimes it requires a piece of paper and a pen and a logical process versus one of the energetic processes of both effective and
Yeah.
sometimes it's that pulling them apart and deconstructing to really get to the heart of, oh, that's what's really going on for me.
Yeah. And there's a little bit of both. I think that's where like the coaching combines with the healing arts for us because
Yes.
there is, okay, so what is going on in your head? And then there is what is going on in your heart and your energy system.
Yeah.
And then let's get those two things in the same place. And then let's go people out in the world.
Yeah.
Awesome. I want to hear everyone's favorite judgments because let's be honest, sometimes they're fun. I have my favorite judgments. I'm pretty sure I've told you they are of my mother and my first husband. And I'd like to hear if you try any of the tools we recommend when you find yourself in judgment and what they create for you.
Yeah. What do you learn about yourself and what do they create? I think that's awesome. And I also want to hear the ones if you come up with some where you're like, oh my God, I have this judgment. And what I realize is how absolutely ridiculous it is. If you have those that show up, post them so I know I'm not the only one.
You are not the only one. I promise. Awesome. Well, thank you guys for listening. We will see you next week or whenever you listen in the future.
Mwah.